Hello everyone, and welcome back to another synth video. Now, how about that for a demo track to get us started off? Now today, I have the great privilege of talking to you guys about the PWM Malevolent, a brand new mono synth that came out this year. Now, every single synth sound you heard in that demo track was created using the Malevolent, and I really hope that goes to show just how wild this synth can get. The Malevolent is the first synthesizer created by brand new company PWM, and at the helm of that company is Paul Whittington, who's actually been creating synthesizers and working in the industry for over 20 years. So he brings a ton of experience, and it really shows with this instrument. At its core, the Malevolent is a semi-modular monosynth with a single philosophy in mind: absolute audio destruction and gnarly sounds. And I think really I've never played a synth where it's so easy to get these kinds of just insanely distorted, just wild synth bass, synth FM sounds. And I think that if you like that, you're gonna absolutely love this synth. Now, PWM did send over the Malevolent for me to check out, but as always, they have no say over the content of this video. So if you do enjoy this video, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I appreciate it. And let's get started. All right, so here we are on the front panel of the Malevolent. Now, as you can see, everything is super logically laid out, where we go from essentially keyboard, LFO, oscillators, mixer, filter, envelopes, and then drive. So let's start by playing just a couple of the basic oscillator shapes so you can see what the core sound is. So we've got a saw wave here. We can tune it. Goes super high or super low, which is great for FM. I really appreciate that the range is so wild. Now, if we go as low as possible, we've literally got an LFO here, or vice versa. Supersonic, right? So let's go ahead. We'll flick through a couple of the wave shapes. Square. We've got our shape here. You can modulate the shape on all three wave shapes, which is great. Saw. And one thing I really like is you can combine the two wave shapes. So if I take, for example, saw and square, or saw and triangle, that one sounds really good. I use that quite a bit. Triangle and square, or all three together. So it's a really versatile oscillator section. So let's leave it on saw for now. We can modulate this with like our LFO, the shape, or the pitch, or with an envelope. So yeah, you've got a lot of possibilities right there on the front panel before we even start diving into patching. So let's bring in oscillator 2, and we're gonna have to tune them manually. As you can see, there's no quantization with semitones or anything like that. So you will have to get used to that a little bit at first, but frankly, it makes for some really awesome, wild, unpredictable sound design, and I find it a lot of fun. So let's bring it in. Need to probably enable an oscillator for that. We'll use our fine tune knob to get as close as possible. So already you can tell like the oscillators are very alive. Like this will sound great just as a lead. Right? So let's bring them down an octave. Let's start, we can use the octave transpose, but I want to start off in the low ranges. And I'll explain why, but it's generally better, in my opinion, on a synth like this, where it's so wild and you are really getting, sometimes temperamental tuning, just like any real live analog synth, like an old Mini Moog, for example. I find that the best results happen if you make the general range of the keyboard without transposing octaves be as close to where you want your sound to be as possible. So we're going to design a bass, so let's bring this way down. Cool, awesome. So I like the sound of that. So For now, we're going to move away from the oscillators. Let's go ahead and check out the mixer. So we've got essentially noise. Really great for gritty sounds, and you've got an opportunity for an aux in if you want to route something else from like another Eurorack module or another synth in there, which is great. So then we've got our filter, and this is a super interesting filter. If I'm not mistaken, it's called a Salin Key filter, and this is completely different than any other filter I own in my studio. Rather than being, you know, your warm, brassy Moog ladder filter where the bass drops out when you bring up resonance, or a really polite like SEM filter with lots of fizz, this thing goes crazy, where as we bring it down, nice warm analog filter, but watch as I increase even any resonance. And remember, there's no drive besides the oscillator driving into the mixer, which we'll go back to in a sec. Listen to how that screams. Like, it's like feeding back. Even with barely any resonance, if we go up an octave here, right? It's wild. So let's go ahead and go back to our bass range. And gain staging on this synth is so important because we basically have with our oscillators, we have two independent levels where anything really past 12 o'clock, you start to drive the filter even more, which is why we were hearing it do that feedback so intensely. But anything below 12 o'clock, we focus on the resonance more. It's like self-oscillating and it's not even at 12 o'clock. So without it, you know, we've got very little drive going through. I'll probably volume automate this in post so you guys can hear more evenly the difference, because it's a very loud synth and you got to be careful with gain staging. So let's go ahead. For example, if we wanted to make a more polite sound, we leave the level of the oscillators down pretty low, turn up resonance just a little bit, and then drive it after. Just get rid of that click a little bit. Right, but then the second we start to add resonance to that, it just screams, right? And then like conversely, if we go back to kind of what we had before, which to be honest, I really like this sound on this synth, which is why I gravitated towards it first. If we start to drive the filter, let's turn off the other drive first. Listen to that, it's like an overdrive pedal. And it's still doing the screaming thing, but oh man, that's gnarly. It's still doing the screaming thing, but instead of it being like this shrill, high frequency self-resonance, it's like just distortion, pure drive. So yeah, sounds really, really great. So let's just take a moment here to take a quick look at the LFO. We'll use it on the filter. I know we're going to go to the drive next, don't worry. So if I turn off resonance so you can hear, so it's hardwired that we use this filter modulation 2 knob to affect the LFO. So our LFO can go nice and high, not quite into audio rates, but it's still pretty solid. And by default, it's a triangle, but we do have a square here if we want to patch it out. We can also, of course, affect the filter with an envelope too. Just solid for like some plucky bass sounds. But again, you're not getting this synth because you want to make basic subtractive pluck sounds. So let's start to get crazy. We've already talked about the first thing that I think makes this synth just wild to design sounds on, which is the Salin Key filter and how it interacts with the drive of the mixer and the filter. But then next we've got another drive circuit after. So let's take off our pluck sound. Let's just grab our already overdriven sound. And then Now we're gonna crank it. Oh man, I'm gonna bring that down in volume and after I'll make everything a bit more even in post, but if you're using this synth, you really have to understand that it can go from so quiet to so loud, but the power of that is you can just get absolute insanity in terms of the distortion. Incredible. And then the final thing that I want to spend some time on, because it's pretty much how I made almost all those sounds in the drop of that intro track, and it's my favorite thing about this synth, is how much FM is possible right at your fingertips here. So what we're going to do, if you notice here in our patch points, we have individual outs for each of the wave shapes, which is so cool, especially on a smaller monophonic synth like this. This is an incredible amount of power. So what that means is we can be using a really gritty saw wave like this, but then take a triangle out, because that is a nicer type of shape for FM, in my opinion, unless you want to just make total cacophonous noise. And then go into, it's hardwired to go to pitch to envelope 1. That's why it says in green. I'm not sure if you can see that on my camera. I'll try to zoom in. But what it's hardwired to is written underneath the patch point. Let's break that normalized patch point and bring in our new FM. So our filter modulation 1 is now FM from the triangle wave of VCO 1. So let's take down the drive a little bit so you can hear, but I'll open the filter. It's easiest to hear. So there we go. We've got oscillator 1 FMing this. If I wanted to at the same time, for example, break the modulation of the filter envelope 1 going into the filter, let's take the triangle wave from oscillator, let's take the pulse wave from oscillator 2 and bring it into the filter. Let's try the saw. And the triangle. It's all the experimentation, right? There you go, I like that. Let's bring back some drive. Bring in some resonance. And then, so we've already got the ingredients here: the drive, the distortion, the overdrive, the filter, and the FM of the different parameters. And now is where we're gonna have some fun. It's like you've got all your ingredients for your dish. Cooking it is about mixing them together. So what I love to do is, while I'm playing around, messing around with the coarse pitch of oscillator 2 or oscillator 1, just offsetting them in some wild way. And this can turn into noise very quickly, so be careful, but it's gonna be awesome noise. So. Like, insane. Like, that to me, just no other synth I own can make a sound like that, especially so easily, right? And then what I would do, I will create sounds like this, and then, like I did in that intro track, I hear something like this. I'm going to sample that into Logic and have that be a bass fill that I can use in any of my tracks. And you're creating these custom made amazing bass sounds and rowdy just noise sounds that you can use in your tracks later on. So let's play around. Let's try to make a couple more sounds to see how versatile you can get with this noise. So let's take away filter FM. Why don't we make them filter modulate each other? So let's do into the envelope of FM1. You know what? I didn't even show you guys that the filter has multiple modes. So let's go from the mix out here into the high pass filter. crazy, right? I could do that all day, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how to make sounds on the Malevolent and why the workflow is so fun compared to other synths I own. Alright, so that about does it for the walkthrough of the synth, and before we get to some sound demos, I wanted to talk briefly about my pros and cons for this synth. Now, my biggest pro is the character and wildness of the sound. This synth genuinely feels alive, and I think that's for me why it absolutely has a place in my studio, despite the fact that I'm lucky enough to have quite a few other synths, including other mono synths. Nothing I own can get this crazy and this wild and this out of control. So if you like the kinds of sounds you've heard over the course of this video, then it's safe to say that really there's nothing else like this, especially in this price bracket, that sounds like this and is this fun to make those kinds of wild sounds on. My second main pro is the fact that this is semi-modular, and not just that, but it's a really well laid out semi-modular synth. For example, the fact that the filter has separate ins for high pass, band pass, and low pass is a lot more versatile than some mono synths I've played, and the fact that each of the oscillators have individual outs for each wave shape, triangle, saw, and square, makes for some really interesting modulation capabilities. On the con side, if you're looking for something with a bit more of a traditional brassy warm filter, this is not going to be it. The Salin key filter really immediately goes crazy and distorts with even the smallest amount of resonance, which gives this synth such character, and it just gives it its unique signature sound. But if you're looking for something to do those kind of mogi basses or, you know, warm prophet style like low chords, this is not going to be it. But again, that's where I think the strength of this synth lies, is there really isn't anything else like this in terms of modern synths that sounds like it. The drive sounds way different and way more gnarly than a Moog. The filter sounds different than any other mono synth I own. And if you like aggressive, industrial, gritty music, you will absolutely love the Malevolent. All right, guys, let's check out some sounds to play us out. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you to PWM for sending over the synth, and I'll see you in the next video.